Hello and welcome to today's episode of Owning Your Menopause podcast. I am really excited for today's guest. She is a functional nutritionist, entrepreneur, and mother with a vast depth of knowledge and experience in women's health, hormonal balance, and nutrition. As we know, women are increasingly suffering from a hormonal roller coaster. From tricky puberty to endometriosis, mood swings or PMT, anxiety and adrenal fatigue, low fertility, poor sleep, fat, plus many challenging menopausal and perimenopausal symptoms. It is with great pleasure that I have Pauline Cox, nutritionist and fellow of integrative medicine, join me today. We will discuss how she helps women of all ages achieve hormonal balance, which will result in better physical and mental health, weight loss, smoother transitions, whatever your age, and lifelong good health. Welcome, Pauline.
Thanks, Kate. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you for joining me. I know that we really kind of connected recently. I have, however, been following you for a very long time, and I love your honesty and your no nonsense approach to nutrition, which I know for many women navigating perimenopause can be massively overwhelming. And yeah, there's so much knowledge. There's so much out there on Instagram, which can be very confusing. But if we start and pull it back, I would love you to tell the listeners like your own experiences and what led you to obviously writing amazing books and brought you down on this path.
Yes, firstly, just to acknowledge what you've said, I absolutely agree. There's so much conflicting and confusing information out there. And that was part of my motivation for writing the books that I've written. As a youngster, as a teenager, I saw my own mum suffering badly. She had a hysterectomy by the time she was 39. And I kind of dreaded what was in store for me, and felt like many women probably still feel now that their own hormonal health was not in their control, but at the mercy of their genes or what they might have inherited, what their mother, sister, aunties are going through. And so the more I learned, the more I discovered, the more I self-experimented and learned on myself in many ways, the more I realized that, wow, we have so much control over our own health in general, but also hormonal health and perimenopausal and menopausal journey. And it really inspired me to try and translate a lot of that complex science into easy to access everyday habits, everyday information, everyday speak. Just talking to women in a way where they go, that makes so much sense. I get it. And I can do that. It's manageable. Because let's be honest, when we're faced with this whole mountain of change, most of the time we go, okay, if I can't do it all, I'm not doing anything. So having things that are very implementable and very easy to access is a huge passion of mine.
Yeah, no, and you do it very well. So what has been your own, I guess, your own experience with perimenopause in terms of things that you've experienced, things that you have found, that have worked for you? Because I think there is a lot of noise out there. As I say, and social media can be really confusing. But it would be good to know, what have your experiences been?
Well, I'm 45 in a couple of weeks, so I'm very much smack bang in the middle of that 10-year journey that we often experience as perimenopause. And that's one of the things that I feel women can sometimes not necessarily grasp, that perimenopause can start in your late 30s and it can be confused with just anxiety or insomnia or stress. But these symptoms that we can start to get at quite an early age, and surprisingly early age, can be as a result of the shift and loss of some of our sex hormones or some of the other hormones, our brain hormones, that are very much affected by shifts in our sex hormones. So for me, I've kind of been on quite a long journey, because I started my journey many years ago now, and I note some of the things that have really changed probably since I turned 40 in my I would say I have to be more aware of how I'm eating now. So with women, particularly at perimenopause, we're more prone to gaining visceral fat. We can have around 7% visceral fat before menopause, and then post-menopause that can increase to around 23% without even changing our diet and our exercise levels. So really having a focus on how we protect ourselves from that shift in visceral fat, because it's that gaining weight around the middle that can be, it can put us at more risk of certain chronic health conditions. So for me, I suppose it's been having more of an awareness and having really strong health habits around what I'm eating, when I'm eating, making sure I'm getting the nutrients I need. The way I see it is it's like putting down your pension now. I'm laying down all these deposits in my body for future, for post-menopause. So making sure I've got enough muscle, making sure my bone density is really optimal, making sure I'm really nutrient sufficient, so I'm not depleting those reserves that might be more challenging for the body as I go beyond menopause. So it's really about thinking about retaining rather than rebuilding after menopause.
I love that. I think that's really key. And that kind of has led me to, I guess, like that other question, because I think, you're right. And certainly the research where, your bone density peaks at 30, your muscle mass declines at 35. So therefore, it's really important that we maintain that or build it, which plays into what you said. Do you think that if more women had, it's a really difficult one, had more access to this information earlier, that this would help them mitigate many of the symptoms that do show up if they haven't laid those foundations? And I guess kind of what I'm saying with that roundabout question is, when I look at our children and when we were young and, parents would say, oh, don't do that because of this. Kids don't really listen. So if I was to say to my daughter, eat well now because it will help you later on, she's not necessarily going to listen. Do you think that if we could empower more people, that would help mitigate those situations?
Yes, I absolutely do. Because really the decades leading up to our perimenopausal journey have such a huge impact on that transition, that time of change and shifting on our hormones. So the more stress we've exhibited, the more of a blood sugar roller coaster we've been on, the more we've depleted key nutrients. Perimenopause is kind of like a barometer for how we've been living for the decades leading up to it. And whilst we can sort of get away with it in our 20s, if we can really start looking after ourselves well in our 30s, it eases us through this transition. One of the things that has such a huge impact on our perimenopausal journey is insulin resistance. So this metabolic health that underpins our everyday life and really our current and our future health. So if our body struggles to use glucose and get it into the cells and insulin levels are just going up and up and up, that has such a huge bearing on the symptoms we're getting within the brain, muscle fatigue, constant hunger, increased likelihood of putting on weight. And so if we can really have this kind of journey up into from 30s into our 40s, where our blood sugars are really balanced, our insulin sensitivity is optimal, and our metabolic health leading into that period is optimal, it has such a big impact on our perimenopausal journey. And that doesn't mean to say we can't start changing that in our 40s or even beyond. It just, as you pointed out, it helps younger women to recognize that there's never a time where it's too early to start thinking about your hormonal health and the impact your everyday decisions, whether to exercise, what to eat, the stress you're under, those all play their part in our hormonal health.
So actually, do you know what? That is the point that really worries me, and that is the point that I really struggle with. And I think let's pick up on that, because I think a lot of people who will be listening to this will be that perimenopausal phase. They're managing their sugar, they're doing it really well. But kids, and if I look at my own, and let's say my daughter, for instance, because obviously we're talking more women's health here, and her hormone health with the sugar, that those hormone imbalances and those kind of crash and burn that we get with that insulin, that sugar, play a part from the minute you start your periods and the minute you've got a cycle. And so, yes, from our 30s, I think we can take more ownership of what we're putting in our bodies, because by some default, perhaps we begin to care a little bit more. We might have children. We want them to eat well. But even me, who's like, I eat well and I try to eat well. My kids are, they do slightly push back against that. And I know that people will be going, well, you feed them the food, you do, but they are independent young adults, and they can go to the shop and they can buy crap, and by God they do. And I will sit there and I'll say, that sugar, you know, and I use that Yucca app. I don't know if you've seen that Yucca app where you can scan
I
things and
have,
it
yeah.
tells you what's in there. And there are a few things that will trigger my daughter to go, okay, I won't. But she goes, well, you did it, you know, and I suppose I did. I had a terrible diet. I ate way too much sugar. But I guess my thing is if we can grasp a hold of that sooner rather than later, and they have a lovely hormonally balanced journey throughout their 20s, 30s, it's going to be easier when we hit perimenopause.
Absolutely. And I think what motivates particularly younger teenagers and beyond is the symptoms, how it's impacting them. So, for example, it could be their skin, it could be heavy periods, painful periods, things that are stopping them doing the things they really want to be doing, their mood. And I think if we tap into that and say, well, listen, you know, the moods or the pain you're experiencing, the discomfort, the heavy bleeding, which is leaving you fatigued and exhausted and anemic, these will all be improved when we look at improving your diet.
Yeah.
And so I think using that as a bit of leverage, because I'm the same, I have teenage children in my house, and my philosophy is just keep adding, and eventually my adding will help take away some of there's no room for the other stuff. So I really help them to prioritize protein, whatever that protein might be. It could be eggs, meat, chicken, fish, and then add in as many berries and veggies as possible. And these are things that are fantastic for us as women, particularly perimenopausal women anyway. So, you know, trying to load that in is, I mean, it's ideal for everyone in the house, but I totally empathize and get the challenges that we face. And we ourselves, you know, we spoke yesterday, we spoke about the sandwich generation. We women going through perimenopause generally have teenage children and then older parents who are also struggling. So we're kind of in the middle where we're like, wow, we've got so much to deal with either end. And here we are struggling with our own health. And so really putting yourself first, prioritizing what you can do for you, and just almost being a role model to your children. Put the food on the table, put the options there, encourage them through just having the berries on the table, the chopped salad, some carrot sticks, however you need to sort of present it to encourage them. And, you know, the more we offer and the more we kind of present those options, generally they will start to over time convert to those options. But it's so challenging because their palate changes. These hyper palatable foods that spike the dopamine, they are very, very hard to compete with.
Yeah, they are, and actually, obviously, I've got one that's got ADHD as well. So beige food is, you know, is sort of. Although that said, you know what, my kids do. They love carrot sticks. They love their fruit. They love their veg. So I'm kind of not worried about that side of it. It's just sometimes when, you know, it might be movie night and they're having movie night with their friends and they come back with an inordinate amount of sour patch crap that you just know is. But look, if it's once or twice, you know, let's go with balance. But I think it is. I think that for me is one of the biggest challenges is, like you say, feeding yourself, looking after yourself, making sure you're strong, and then being that provider, you know, for kids as well. And I think that's where women probably feel really overwhelmed with then having to
Yeah.
make change. And I imagine you work with a lot of women where you'll be like, right, okay, this is what we're going to do, then this is how we're going to make change. And it's like me with exercise. It just seems so overwhelming. What would be, I mean, let's kind of go, what would be if someone came to you, your two or three, like must change things? I know you've talked about protein, but let's maybe delve into that a little bit.
Yes.
Things that they should try to really add to three lovely, wholesome, balanced meals a day, because that's the other thing
Yeah.
is fasting, women not eating, thinking that actually cutting food is going to help them manage calorie intake. So let's talk a little bit around that, and how would you encourage
Yeah.
people you work with to, yeah.
I think the first thing I do with women is really just let them know that it's not them, it's not their fault, it's not that they're greedy or have no willpower or because a lot of women who I work with are like, I'm trying so hard, but I just can't stay away from the ... I feel like I just need it. It's so important to recognize that our physiology is incredibly powerful. When our brain feels like it's not getting the fuel it needs, it will literally scream at you to keep eating. And that's what happens when our brain becomes insulin resistant. We're taking in the fuel, but our brain's not getting access to that fuel. So we get this persistent hunger, these constant cravings. So depending on the individual I'm working with, I'll just let them know, look, it's not you, your physiology. You're battling a very, very powerful force here. When you start working with your physiology, you'll notice, wow, okay, that constant hunger, those cravings, that irritability I'm feeling really starts to go. And there's no more powerful negative emotion than shame and guilt. So it's kind of just going like, let's wipe the slate clean and say to yourself, I need to get to know me. I need to understand how I work and how I work with myself. And so from a food perspective, what that looks like first and foremost is let's start enjoying food. Let's see it for what it is. Delicious, exciting, this fantastic range and massive variety of things that we can enjoy and eat. And let's look at the proteins you enjoy. So when you prioritize your protein, it stops you feeling hungry all the time, because when your brain doesn't get enough amino acids, the building blocks of protein, it will shout at you that it's hungry. Your brain hormones, your neurotransmitters, your happy hormone, serotonin, your motivation hormone, dopamine, need these building blocks. They need amino acids. So if you're lacking in those, you're going to be lacking in dopamine. And then what do? This dopamine seeking behavior, which is basically go for something that'll give you a big, quick hit of dopamine. Alcohol, sugar, highly palatable foods, whoosh, dopamine goes straight up and the brain's like, that's better. So when you prioritize protein, morning, lunch, and your evening meal, then your body feels more satiated. You're telling your body, here's what you need. Then you start building your plate around your protein, your vegetables, your fermented foods, healthy fats, eggs, avocados, olives, olive oil, your meat, don't go for the super lean meat, go for some meat that has a bit of substance, the Greek yogurt with the fat, again, to help you feel more satiated. So we're looking at giving the body what it needs. So it stops your body screaming at you to give it more.
Do you think there's a certain element, and I've got two questions here, this I'm just keep writing my notes, which is what when you say things. I suppose my first question on that is the 20-minute rule. Is that true or is that a myth? When people say you think you're hungry, I guess it plays into maybe that dopamine thing. I always remember or reading, your body's telling you you're still hungry after a meal. Wait for 20 minutes before you kind of action on that. Is that a real thing?
So hunger comes in a couple of ways, really. Hunger can be a true hunger, where we get a ghrelin spike. Grr is your kind of, grr, I'm hungry, your hunger hormone. Now, ghrelin, it's a bit like the Pavlov experiments where you ring the bell and the dog salivates. When you eat throughout the day, let's say you eat at 9, 11, 1, 3, 5, 8, your body becomes entrained to spike with a ghrelin hormone peak at those points. So even if you're not hungry, if you're used to eating that regularly at those times, you're going to get a hunger hormone spike. So it's important to recognize as you're shifting and changing your eating habits without snacking maybe and just going breakfast, lunch and dinner, you're going to get a feeling of hunger at 11 if that's when you usually have a custard cream or a Kit Kat on the way to work or whatever it may be. Then recognizing that your body is just saying, well, I usually eat at this time, why am I not eating now? That changes very quickly. Within a week, those ghrelin spikes have shifted and gone. The other thing to recognize is hunger can come, you're eating, but the glucose within your blood sugar is not getting to where it needs to, into the brain, into the muscle, because of the insulin resistant state. And women, as we go through perimenopause, are more prone to insulin resistance. So you're eating, but your brain's like, well, I'm not getting the fuel. The other thing to note is as estrogen levels go down, estrogen helps to get glucose into your brain cells. So it helps insulin shift the glucose in. Now, if we're already struggling to get that glucose in because insulin's not really playing its role very well, and now we're losing estrogen, hunger can go through the roof. And even though you've got fuel on your body that you can access, the body's like, well, no, I can't access it because these rising insulin levels are actually blocking our fat burning. So there's this huge metabolic picture. at play when it comes to perimenopause. Now, the other thing is emotional eating. You know, we're hungry because we need the comfort of food, and that can be really prevalent during perimenopause as well, because our mood can start to go down. Women are 4 times more at risk of depression during perimenopause than after postmenopause or in our 30s before perimenopause. So recognizing that there's this shift in our mood, and it's a real shift. It's a shift in the hormones in our brain. GABA, our calming, feel-good hormone, and serotonin can both shift as a result of progesterone and estrogen changing. And so we look for more comfort, for things that make us feel good. And unfortunately, comfort foods that are high in sugar, salt, and fat instantly give us that comfort.
Yeah, I mean, I could listen to you all day. I love listening to that because I think it's really important that when we talk about this life stage, and I know there's been a lot of chat recently about sort of overemphasizing, perimenopause or menopause when it comes to workouts and eating and what we should and what we shouldn't do, and are people jumping on a bandwagon? But the reality is, completely playing into what you've just said, is we're not taking advantage of women in that situation. We're highlighting really how we should all eat all the time, but it's even more important with this massive hormonal shift when we navigate perimenopause and our estrogen declines, that we implement the things that we should have already implemented and really stick to them in order to kind of help. Because I think, again, this is what you're saying. You've talked about the fats, you've talked about that protein. Two things there. I think a lot of women cut out fat. We know that that's massively important, again, in terms of our hormone health, balancing our blood sugars, and obviously, nourishing and fueling our body. With the protein, because I think you see so many different things, and I think that's where it becomes quite confusing. So I would recommend to my clients, I'm not a nutritionist, 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. I do know, however, that some women potentially might need more, and if they needed more, would those be the women who aren't feeling satiated after they've eaten those meals?
Yeah, and I think it very much depends on the type of protein as well. Animal protein is more satiating just because it's a complete form of protein and we get more protein from that animal meat. I'm not saying that vegans and vegetarians can't get their daily needs met, but it's important to recognize that the bioavailability of the food you're eating, like the steak, chicken, the bioavailability of the protein changes depending on the kind of foods you're eating. So I would always say to someone, when it comes to protein, you have to look at your own situation, your age. Many women don't get enough protein as they're getting older, particularly the elderly, but even women in their 40s and 50s, so still younger women, are not getting enough protein. Are we breaking down protein enough? Are you on an antacid or a PPI, so something that's reducing your stomach acidity, which is going to reduce your body's ability to break down that protein and access the amino acids? Are you exercising heavily? Meaning you have more need for protein, for amino acids. Are you healing? Do you have a chronic illness? It's very important that we look at that individual. For me, sort of a very typical 45-year-old woman who is active, I do a lot of dog walking. I don't do lots and lots of structured exercise every day, but I move a lot, I walk a lot, and I do some sort of resistance routines myself at home. But my protein needs wouldn't be the same as yours because of the amount of exercise that you do for your job on a daily basis. However, saying that, I do make sure I get plenty of protein in. I will add in collagen peptides, I'll add in bone broth powder, I'll eat Greek yogurt, I'll supplement my diet to the point where I know even if I feel a bit peckish, I'm like, okay, have I had enough protein? Go eat some Greek yogurt. And if you're still hungry, then let's see, shall we? I kind of have this little chat with myself. And most of the time, that hunger is just me like, whew, it's been a long day. I'm feeling a bit bored. I want to eat something. And I just say to my body, well, you know what? You're 45 now. Your hormones are shifting. Let's give you some Greek yogurt, some blueberries, some seeds and nuts, maybe a bit of nut butter, and let's see how you're feeling. And, it's so delicious and satisfying that most of the time I'm like, that was what I needed. But we have to be cautious because we essentially live in this very we live in a world that's at odds to what our genes want to be doing. We're cave women, and we live in this very go, 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 go world where we're constantly juggling. We have all these foods at our disposal, these smells, things sending our dopamine systems through the roof. So we kind of have to understand how our body works, just at a simplistic level, to go, you know, I know what's best for me. I'm the gatekeeper of me. I'm falling in love with taking care of myself as opposed to battling with myself. I want to look after this amazing vehicle that's going to take me to my 90s rather than get angry at it and frustrated at it.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, isn't it? I think that this particular cohort of women, like navigating menopause at the moment as well, we were brought up in such that society where it was cut carbs, where it was low fat, where it was, I mean, gosh, some of those diets I tried, what was that? There was one with like maple syrup and pepper and, and I think we all put our bodies through so much to kind of have this. I guess it was so much about the aesthetics. I worry that it still slightly is. I don't know how much the narrative is changing, but I think as midlife women, we need to change that narrative for ourselves. And we've
Yeah.
touched on bone health, we've touched on, heart health, we've touched on muscle strength. And there's no way that we can build and all of that can function without implementing some of these key principles that you've talked about, that protein, good fats. I worry that I think women that I work with and guide with on that exercise, and perhaps those that you work with, when you say to them, introduce breakfast and eat more, they really really struggle though to change that. And I know you say that it can take, you know, with the girl in, you can change that kind of desire, your body's own natural desire. It's changing that mindset for that woman who has
Yeah.
for years had that negative self chat. And that is something that I think we really focus on a lot, because I still find women, they commit to something for that amount of time, and it's trying to get them to break this yo-yo cycle and this pattern. And I think for some women as well, there might be this moment of a little bit of weight gain when they do change what they're doing because their body's readjusting, and they panic. And then they're like, okay, I'm going to default to what did work in my 20s, and I'm going to go back and starve myself again. And they almost don't trust sometimes the process that we're trying to take them through to
Yeah.
really help them see what it is they can achieve.
And I think that's where scales possibly can even be quite negative. I haven't weighed myself for, I can't remember the last time. I don't have scales at home. I feel like scales are very misleading for people when they're looking to regain or build muscle, when they're on a journey where they're trying to understand their body a bit more. What I really love to help women understand it's the shape that can be really helpful to monitor, because we want that hip to waist ratio to remain in place as long as possible, because that's a real indicator of our risk of chronic health. So think, and when we really optimize our blood sugar balance and our fat burning, because we're dual fuel burners. We're designed to use glucose for fuel and ketones for fuel, and our body's very, very good at adapting to these two different sources of fuel. That's what allows us, or would have allowed us as hunter-gatherers, to go for days and days without eating, because we carry fuel on our body, and that fuel we can break down into ketones, and our body will happily use ketones. Now, if we are stuck in this sugar burning state and our insulin goes up, 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 and we become this insulin resistant state, then insulin will block your body's ability to access the stored fuel, the fat on your body, to burn it. And that's where women can be tearing their hair out going, I'm hardly eating, I'm exercising so hard, and I haven't lost a single pound in weight for the last 4 weeks. And yet, when we focus more on what you're eating and when you're eating, and optimizing your blood sugars and your insulin sensitivity, it's just like this light bulb moment, because they're like, wow, my body's just let go of all this stored fat, and I feel more energized, and my mood is better, and my sleep is better, and I kind of like myself again. I'm not frustrated and annoyed at myself. And that's the power of tapping into what's going on at a metabolic level, i.e. the blood sugars and your insulin, in terms of supporting your journey and how that impacts mood, mental well-being, hot flushes, sleep, and beyond, your risk of Alzheimer's and these other neurodegenerative conditions, because the brain becomes underfueled when we're in that insulin resistant state.
Do you know, it's interesting you say that, because when I first introduced breakfast, because I was terrible at eating breakfast, and I was like, right, I'm going to do protein for breakfast because that's what I meant to do. And I would, and I loved, like you just said, the Greek yogurt, the berries, pumpkin seeds, walnuts. But for me, that didn't work. Like, I would literally Greek yogurt for breakfast. For me, my brain goes, sweet day. Like, there's something in me, and maybe it pulls back to what you said about the animal protein. And I know obviously Greek yogurt is in some sort of way an animal protein. I have to start my day now. I've worked it out. It has to be eggs or tofu. Or, I mean, I will even have, and obviously we both have a very wonderful mutual friend in common, Julia Bradbury, who, I will do what she does, and I'm pretty sure she's got it from you.
Yeah.
Have broccoli and tofu and eggs and mushrooms, and that for me is a breakfast. It has to be a savoury breakfast. If I have yogurt, my brain goes sweet. So my yogurt will always be a snack or a pudding, because I quite like sometimes. So I will always have that as that's my after, like, savoury. And I had to work that out, because I just, again, was like, well, everyone says have Greek yogurt, so I'm going to do it. And then 2 hours later, I'd be like, oh God, I've had like a big old bowl of Greek yogurt and it just hasn't filled me up.
And I think that concept of change your breakfast, change your life is really powerful, because if we start our day off with a sugary bowl of cereal or some toast and jam, or even just toast and Marmite, people don't realize that wheat in your toast is spiking your blood sugar. So 20 minutes later, even an hour later, you can be hungry again. I'm not vilifying all carbs. However, it's really important to look at how your body responds to certain foods, because the continuous big blood spikes in your sugar are going to cause your body to say, well, now I want more of that. Or I think I'd like more of that. That you've given me 3 slices of toast. I quite fancy half the loaf of bread now. Or, I've had 1 custard cream. Why don't we go back and get another 3? It's that big rise in blood sugar and then the drop that really drives us to want more of that food. So setting yourself up from the morning, going for a walk, these are very, very simple things we can do to improve our sleep, mood, and metabolic health. A morning walk, start your day with a protein-heavy breakfast, whether that's some nice eggs, scrambled eggs, boiled eggs, poached eggs, even fry them gently in some ghee or some butter. Get some veggies in there, mushrooms, broccoli, as you pointed out. Get a really nutritious breakfast and then stop eating. Like, don't snack if you can until you get your next meal, lunchtime. And if you want some nice dark chocolate or some sweet berries, perfect, but have it after your meal, because it really helps to reduce the blood sugar spikes. And then again, with no snacking until evening time. And what happens when we stop snacking is it really helps to stabilize our blood sugars, but it starts to resensitize insulin. So let's say we stop eating at 7 p.m. at night. The body then recognizes that it's not getting fuel constantly coming. Insulin becomes more regulated, more sensitive, so it starts to come down, and then all of a sudden the body's like, well, actually, look, I got myself a whole store of fuel on my body that I can access. And you start becoming a more efficient fat burner. And this releases ketones into the bloodstream. Those ketones don't need a transporter to get into the brain cells. So they don't need estrogen's help. They don't need a glucose transporter like glucose does in the brain. They just go, I'm here and I'm coming in. And the brain all of a sudden is like, wow, I feel so alert. I feel really focused. My memory's improving. And that all comes when we become more efficient at using glucose and mopping it up and burning fat for fuel that's already stored on our body.
I love it. I'm feeling so holistic this morning now, because I've been for a walk, I've done a workout, I've had a 3-egg omelette with spinach, some flax seeds and some pumpkin seeds and a little bit of apple cider vinegar on top. So I am feeling
amazing.
Feeling like I've done the Pauline Cox method. I'm great, and I'm going to not be hungry. We should come up with something, the Pauline Cox method. I'm going to ask you 2 last questions. I was like, we normally keep it to half an hour, and I literally could sit here and talk to you forever. I'm going to ask you 2 questions that I really want. Oh God, there's 3. No, 2. I'm going to go with 2. What's the worst myth that you feel is out there for women at this life stage?
I think it's that we have this horrendous journey ahead of us, and there's nothing we can do to control it. I feel the complete opposite. I feel as we go through perimenopause into menopause, we're entering our wisdom years. We're entering a period where we're shaking off the reproductive years, the burden of that, and going, wow, I'm entering a time now where I really do have complete ownership over my body, and it's a really exciting time. I think it's something we should be embracing and going, celebrating this change in our body. So I feel so sad when women dread going through this period, and B, feel like, well, wow, there's just nothing I can do, when there's so much that you can do. So that myth, I would love to just like
Get it out.
chuck it out the window.
And I do have to touch on it very quickly. And I know this might be a long-winded answer, but I know maybe you can give us the top 5, and then we might have to do another podcast at some point. But supplements, we haven't touched on supplements, and I know that supplementation is a huge part of the narrative. There's a lot of snake oil out there. You are absolutely brilliant, and the suggestions that you give, and I love your knowledge around that. Let's maybe just give a brief synopsis of maybe like the top 5 supplements that you would suggest for a woman in perimenopause.
Well, I think first it's important to link them to the symptoms that women are going through, because perimenopause is a pro-inflammatory period. It's why so many women can start to feel aches, pains, increase in migraines, low mood, issues with their digestion. As we lose progesterone and estrogen, these are both very anti-inflammatory hormones. So it's important that we see how that plays into these symptoms. Increased blood sugars, which we're more prone to, as I've mentioned, is also an inflammatory state. And if we're not getting enough anti-inflammatory foods in our diet, that further adds to the load. So adding in some really nice anti-inflammatory supplements is incredibly helpful for this journey. So omega-3 fatty acids would be my number one. So we usually get these in oily fish, and you can get the plant-based ones in linseed and chia seed, in hemp and walnuts. But if you're lacking in the intelligent fats, the ones that come from oily fish, it can really impact your mood and all those aches and pains and joint stiffness that you get. So I'm a huge advocate, not just for perimenopausal women, incidentally, for children, teenagers, perimenopause and beyond, for men, women. Everyone really needs omega-3s to help balance out that massive influx of omega-6s we get every day. So I would say an omega-3 fatty acid, one that's really going to have the anti-inflammatory effect, the mood enhancing, and the brain protection. Because when we're low in omega-3s, it puts us at more risk of neurodegenerative conditions, as well as this period when we're 4 times more likely to be suffering from depression. So I would say just ensure you're getting a really nice quality. The one I choose is ahi flower oil, so it's called Regenerative Omegas. It's not a fish-based product, because there's some really poor practices that go on in the fish oil industry, and I just feel it's not a sustainable industry with everyone needing omega-3s. If we all had fish oil, there'll be no fish left in the ocean. So finding a really good quality and one that has high efficacy, i.e. it works, it has the anti-inflammatory effect, it has the brain protecting effects and joint protecting effects, to me is very important. So this ahi flower, ahi flower oil, is one that I use, and it's called Regenerative Omegas. Now, the next supplement I would say is magnesium. Magnesium is magnificent for women of perimenopausal age. What magnesium does is, as progesterone levels go down, which happens in very early perimenopause, so women can often note in those early stages that their periods become heavier, that their anxiety increases, they become more prone to insomnia, and that's this shift. So estrogen can still stay quite high and progesterone can lower, and you can get this quite estrogen dominant state in those early years. So as progesterone goes down, progesterone has an impact on GABA, our calming neurotransmitter in the brain. So we can start to feel more anxious and not sleep so well. Magnesium helps to increase GABA. So we're getting this sort of support where progesterone's going, magnesium's coming in to calm the nervous system. Magnesium helps to support blood sugar balance. It supports energy production in the muscles. It helps the thyroid. It helps with activating vitamin D. It's very anti-inflammatory. I mean, it has so many benefits in the body. It has over 300 functions within the body. It's very important for bone density. Many women think about calcium as being important, but if you're supplementing calcium and you're not taking magnesium, the chances are you're depleting yourself even more of magnesium. And when we're stressed or inflamed or we have a high sugar diet, we're already depleting magnesium. So a good quality, and I want to emphasize here, magnesium oxide is very poorly absorbed. So if you're taking a magnesium and you feel like, wow, it's not really working, I take it at bedtime, I still don't sleep well, look at the label. If it says magnesium oxide, it's likely not getting into your system. You want a magnesium glycinate or biglycinate. Magnesium citrate is another bioavailable form. However, it can upset your tummy a little bit. It can cause a loosening of the stools. So my preference is the biglycinate, so 2 glycine molecules and a magnesium. And that biglycinate, that particular compound is very bioavailable, but the glycine helps to lower your core body temperature at night. It helps to increase your master antioxidant called glutathione. It helps with collagen building. So it's a really helpful kind of formula for the body to have access to. I also like one with a B6 in it, because B6 helps with serotonin levels. So we have omegas, magnesium, zinc. Zinc is very helpful for women. You know, unless you're eating lots of oysters and seafood, it may be that you're low in zinc. If you're taking HRT, if you're taking the oral contraceptive pill, this will deplete you of zinc. If you're eating a vegetarian or vegan diet and you're not eating lots of oysters or maybe even red meat and lamb, but you still can be low in zinc because you need a really acidic stomach to absorb zinc. Certain medications are also going to impact your body's zinc status. So, there's quite a few of them. Beta blockers, for example, so propanol will deplete you. So it's important just to think about, do I have the symptoms of low zinc? Am I always getting infections? Does it take me a long time to get over a cold? Do I have poor wound healing? Is my hair thinning? Because zinc's really important for supporting the hair follicles and the oil production in the hair follicle. Do I have little white spots on my nails? Also for women, zinc is very important for protecting and maintaining the vaginal pathway. So the reproductive organs, the vagina is very rich in collagen, and it's very, very dense in lactobacillus. So our gut microbiome, we want this huge diversity. Within the vagina, we just want like 98% lactobacillus. It's a very hostile environment for a lot of other microbes, and that's how we want it. But as we go through perimenopause, and particularly into the later stages when we're losing estrogen, we're at risk of thinning, drying, and dropping, so prolapsing of our reproductive organs. So maintaining collagen helps to keep the folds and the thickness. Zinc helps to maintain the mucosal membranes, like the mouth, if you're getting mouth ulcers, internal dryness, which can cause a lot of issues like pain on intercourse and discomfort. So zinc is a big favourite of mine for many, many reasons, as I've mentioned just a few. And then vitamin D. We've had a little bit of sunshine. We've been really lucky for the last maybe week in getting some sunshine. But vitamin D is so important for women. It's highly anti-inflammatory. It helps us to increase our calcium absorption. I always pair mine with a K2. So I just use a little spray. I brought this one so you guys can see. It's a MCT oil, so a coconut-based oil. It's really cost effective. These are about £20 and they last me about 3 months. So just a couple of sprays. The K2 tells the calcium where to go. So let's say we're having our D3 and our K2. You're eating a beautiful feta salad and you're getting Greek yogurt, you're getting all this wonderful calcium. Unless you're getting adequate K2, that calcium can be going to your breast tissue, your cardiovascular system. So D3 will increase the absorption of calcium, but the body needs direction. Where's it going? That's K2's job. So natural food sources of K2 are fermented cheeses like Munster, Camembert, Roquefort, or just get your D3 paired with a K2. So those are my top 4. Now, I would say my number 5 is more around mood and anxiety, because this is an area I see time and time again with women on this perimenopausal journey. I'm anxious, I'm just low in mood, and there's so many things that they can do to help with that. L-theanine, I love L-theanine because it really helps to calm the nervous system. It's a precursor to GABA, the neurotransmitter I spoke about earlier. So it can just help you just get that sense of calm in your day. If you're getting that unexplained anxiety, it can be taken at night as well before bed, just to help calm and switch off the brain. And then the other one I would say is saffron. Saffron's fantastic for increasing serotonin naturally, and it can be taken with an SSRI, so an antidepressant. It's been researched on women, perimenopausal women specifically, and menopausal women. So it's a really nice way of saying, look, I'm already taking an antidepressant, but I still don't feel so great. It can help with mood, compulsive behaviors like compulsive eating, and it can also just help with motivation and libido.
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you. Top 5 there. I've written it all down. I'm going to come to you. You're going to sort me out with all of those, because I know we did our Instagram live and I wrote the same thing down and I haven't sorted it, but I definitely think from what you've said in terms of my own journey, I could do with some zinc. L-theanine I definitely need a good magnesium. I seem to just take random things because that's my personality, but I probably need to really hone in on that. Thank you. I'm not going to ask you my last question, which is the one thing you wish every woman knew before starting the perimenopause, because we have answered that in sort of the worst myths. So what I want you to leave our listeners with is, where can they find you? Because you are incredible in this space, and I'm so grateful for you. So where can they buy your books? Where can they follow you on Instagram? And then I know that you've got an amazing online shop as well, where they can buy some of the supplements that you have talked about today. Tell us where you are.
Yes, you could find me on Instagram. I do a lot of short little educational pieces, or sometimes a bit longer, with my lives, to really help women deep dive into certain subjects. So I'm on Instagram at Pauline J. Cox. My books, so my first book, Primal Living in a Modern World, is available at Sow and Arrow. So it's SOW and arrow.com. And my second book, Hungry Woman, Eating for Happiness, Health and Hormones, is available on Amazon and everywhere pretty much. Just, you can either Google it or go on Amazon and find it there. It is available at Sow and Arrow, but frankly it's cheaper on Amazon, so you can get it there. And yes, my one of my favorite things is finding high quality supplements that work, and I'm very, very particular about those compounds, the cleanliness, bioavailability and sustainability. And then, as you mentioned, I have a physical shop and an online store called Sow and Arrow, and that's where companies have to work very hard to show me that their products work, because really I feel like I'm doing the due diligence so that women who are really struggling through these areas don't feel confused. They don't feel worried that what they're taking is not right for them. It's there, it's a high quality product, and it does what it says on the tin.
And that's why I love you, because I think that is the problem. It's cutting through the noise and the things that are often missold. So if anyone is out there and they've got their supplements, they're worried about the efficacy, they're worried about, whether it's snake oil, snake poison, whatever the word is, go and follow Pauline and look at lots of her products. So thank you. I've loved that chat, and I know we've got lots more to come, which I'm really excited for, but thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kate.